Here we are live.
Hello, welcome to WP-Tonic, episode number 113. Today we're talking what goes into a winning WordPress proposal. And our panel today, let's go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves. Morten.
Hey, I am Morten. I work for lynda.com from LinkedIn, and I'm early celebration of Norwegian excellence at the Olympics, therefore the hat. This
Nice.
is the Norwegian ski team hat, obviously, because clearly they're going to compete in the Summer Olympics, as we all know.
Oh, you mean it doesn't snow in Norway in the summer?
Something like that.
Jackie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jackie D'Elia with Jackie D'Elia Design. I build custom websites for small and medium businesses. That's it.
Okay, cool. Sallie.
Hi, my name is Sallie Goetsch. My business is WPFangirl.com, and I also am the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California.
Awesome.
Jonathan.
Hi there, folks. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic, so blame this madness on me. And WP-Tonic is also a maintenance and WordPress small job fix company. We do all the stuff so you can concentrate on building your business.
Absolutely. And I'm John Locke. I run a small WordPress consultancy in Sacramento called Lockedown Design. Well, before we get into today's main topic, let's go over really quick some WordPress news stories. First up, we've got Helen Husandi's post on theme disconnect. Morten, did you have a chance to read this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, he did. I saw his comments.
Yes. Helen is talking about something that I think several people have talked about before. I wrote an article about something somewhat related to this earlier this year as well. It kind of circles back to a project that I was involved with last year, I think, called NUX, N-U-X, New User Experience, where Drew, I can't remember his last name, Drew, who was the project lead for 4.3.
Is that Drew James?
Yes, Drew James. He started this project called NUX, which was looking at the new user experience and whether the first time WordPress user is presented with an acceptable user experience. And the simple answer is no. It's super confusing because WordPress has just gotten way too complex. And we had a lot of discussions about what should be done, but not much came out of it for various reasons. Go open source, all good ideas die on the vine. So that's kind of where it comes from, that the idea of this new user experience project has been lingering around, but it needs to have a better focus in that the lead developers need to be more invested in that and not in other things. So the project came out of, when you set up a WordPress site, what are the next steps you should be doing? Is it to start creating a post? Is it to customize your theme? And what Helen is saying is maybe we should start creating a user experience that really focuses on immediately after setting something up, designing a theme. But to do that, you need to have more control and you need to have some data to work with. It's not enough with that hello world post. So she's asking if we should have demo content that makes a theme match what you see in the theme directory, and whether some editing should be possible from the customizer rather than from a post editor, and so on and so on. So
Right, that proposal about creating pages from the menu interface, for instance.
Yeah, which is a terrible idea. Like, honestly, it's the worst idea I've seen in a long time. That's what my comment is about. And Helen disagrees with me on that, and that's fine. Like, that's why we have a conversation. The reason why I think it's a bad idea is because it is a convolution of context. So if you do if you use the customizer for content creation, you're convoluting what the customizer is for. However, I don't have a problem with content creation happening within the customizer space, as in on the screen, as long as the content editing is happening inside the WordPress site, not in the customizer panel itself where it is right now. So I think it's a solvable problem. It's just, again, this is moving too far forward. The larger problem is actually how do we get people into the customizer and help them understand the customizer before they start even thinking about content. So.
Right, it's true. There is not like a, well, I guess when you first install WordPress, there is kind of a customize your site button. I close that screen so quickly that I don't even pay attention to it. But yeah, there isn't any process for kind of leading people through setting their site up.
What the Nux team originally ended up working with was almost exclusively that welcome panel that shows up on the first, and what that says and the order in which that happens. And a ton of work was done on it, and almost none of it was implemented, even though it's just a text field, because we were discussing how it changes the behavior of the user. But I think a larger conversation needs to be had about what is the user experience like when you first set it up, and should you even land on the admin page first, or should you go somewhere else first, or should there be like a wizard, or there's a lot of things that need to be discussed here. So it's good that it's starting.
I think that from a new user perspective, one of the primary things I would be looking for if I didn't know anything about WordPress and I come in would be just a separation of the functionality, like administration things and configuration things, and then publishing things. And because I think for when I work with clients that don't use WordPress on a daily basis and they're getting a WordPress site, it's confusing to them where they go to do like their daily work, the publishing that they're going to do, versus where they do administrative and configuration, and they're kind of all mixed in right now. It is very difficult to tell. I mean, I'd love to see 3 buttons when you first come in. That's publishing, that's configuration, and that's administration if you're setting up users and user roles and things like that, and keep it more streamlined as far as being so overwhelmed when they get into the panel. You've got the whole confusion with post and pages right off the bat. Everything is set up still as a blog when 99% of the sites I do right now are all static sites per se with a blog component, and I think that's just it's all very confusing for people. That's my take on it.
Sorry?
Oh, Sallie, I was just saying, Sallie.
Yes, I was just thinking, that about Jackie's point is, yeah, I mean, do we want the dashboard, the first thing people see when they log in, to be, kind of great big boxes that say like design, content, admin. Perhaps not, and the thing is, it's as we dig into this, it's sort of like, oh, we could end up overhauling the entire, administrative side of WordPress, and that is not exactly a small project or an easy one to implement.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be. But I think as time goes by, starting to group things together that are like areas would make it easier for people to do, and not. The biggest issue I have is clients can break their site so easily in there, and if they're just going in there every day to publish content, it's so easy to stumble on areas like change your theme and then accidentally realize, oh dear. Or someone is debugging a plugin and helping you and saying, go back to the default 2016 theme, see if you still have a problem, and then they go back to their theme and all their widgets are gone, everything is all moved around because there's no saving of that configuration when you change a theme and when you change back. So if you've got widgets in your theme that you built for your client that are specialized, and they go into the 2016 theme and then they go back, none of those placeholders are put back together. So everything's all messed up, and they call you and say, what happened? So that's like a perfect example of things that should be somewhere else where it's just not just in the whole list of things that you're doing on a daily basis that you are scrolling up and down on the left side. That's just my take on it.
Right. I mean, there's an argument for having your clients have editor accounts to log in and manage content.
But you also,
but they have to own their site.
Yeah.
Right, but
they
you
have
also
to have some admin access.
Yeah, when you also turn projects over to clients and you may not be supplying the maintenance for them, and they do have to have the admin level, especially if they need to, they're encouraged to always keep their plugins updated and keep their themes updated and all these things. Well, that all requires admin access. So by default, whoever's using the site on a daily basis is probably going to have that access. And I think it would be nice if those things were just, when you see like a configuration group or an administration thing, you kind of know, okay, these are areas that are going to change things, and versus maybe just publishing content where you're happy to go and work on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think there's something there is something there. This idea that right now there's, apart from a vertical or a depth hierarchy, there's really nothing in the interface to tell you these things at the top. They have to do with creation of content. Then there's this midsection, which is like other people's content, and then there's this admin section, which has to do with how the site behaves. And doing something about how that is displayed, or maybe sectioning it up better, or even changing the visual priority of it so that the most frequent use items are bigger and more prominent, whereas the settings are less, would make a huge difference, simply because then, again, it has to do with context. You know that you are in content creation context or changing my site context. But I think what all this entire conversation and all these conversations we're having in the community right now about where do we bring WordPress next and how do we move the project forward, they all hinge on this point that no one is really talking about, and that is, we don't know anything about the end user. Like, we truly are flying blind with a big bag on our head.
Everybody who's making the decisions are the people that use WordPress every day and are the ones that do the implementations, the customizations, or the code writing. And I don't think a lot of us have any idea what it's like for an average publishing content person to use WordPress on a daily basis.
Exactly. And this comes from the open source mentality, right? It makes total sense, because the open source mentality is the people who use it contribute, and you own it. So you're like, I need an elephant button, so I'm going to add an elephant button, and because I need it. And if someone doesn't like it, they can try to take it away, but then I'll just put it back again, and then eventually there will be a permanent elephant button in the system. And that's all fine and dandy when WordPress is a little project that 10,000 people use. When there are millions and millions and millions of websites, that's no longer how you can do it. And all respect to the core team, they do a fantastic job at making sure dumb shit doesn't end up in WordPress. I think after the content, what is it called, the disaster with WordPress 3.6, which was
the post formats.
Post formats UI.
I was so annoyed.
That whole mess.
I was so annoyed when they pulled them out at the last minute.
Yeah, but see,
just finished recording a bunch of tutorials on how to use them.
Yeah, but from a user
broken,
perspective, that was awful. That was a truly awful feature. It was like every single test that was ever done on it, when new people started using it, they were like, oh, this doesn't add images? What the hell is going on? Why is my content ending up on the bottom? Like, the implementation, the idea was fantastic. The implementation was a total disaster. And it was in user testing that it turned out this is not what we think it is. But at that point, it had gone so far, it was already in core. And that's why Matt ended up coming in and shutting it down, right?
Right, and then that's why they decided, well, let's try this features as plugins thing so that it doesn't happen again.
But the problem is features as plugins doesn't actually address the core issue, which is we truly do not know how people use WordPress. And the argument that comes back is one of two things. It's either those who contribute decide what happens, which is absurd, because we're trying to take over the whole internet, and we can't actually do things that way because we're simply not informed enough about how people use WordPress to make those decisions. And the other argument is user testing is not possible because it costs money, which is also true in that we need to do extensive user testing, and that does cost money, and it does require an investment in time. However, that is a completely solvable issue.
Yes.
And it's something that I think the reason why it's not being done right now is because it's not sexy. No one wants to be like, well, my company is going to invest $1 million in user testing for WordPress. That doesn't sound like something cool, right? That sounds like something super boring. And it's also a colossal amount of work, but it's something that we need to do at this point. And I've even proposed methods for doing it, involving academia in it and doing all these other things. But the conversation just stagnates because in the end, I think, honestly, the community doesn't want to build applications that work for the common user. They want to build applications that work for themselves. And that is the problem.
The WordPress, the way it is right now, is perfect for the people who use it every day that actually write code, customize, build things. It is, and I would say even, I could argue though that the user experience is maybe rated at a medium for the app for those people, because it could even be better for us as well. But because I often forget where I have to go sometimes for simple things that it's in multiple places now there, or you, like if I work in Genesis, there's some settings in Genesis that also are similar to the settings in the settings panel, and I have to remember, okay, now which one is this one doing? So yeah, that could even be easier. But I agree with you. We are designing it for ourselves, not for the people who use it.
And that's fine if what you're building is a tool for developers. But if it's supposed to be, if the purpose of WordPress is really to democratize publishing, then we need to think a lot more about the first-time user.
I give you an award. That was exactly the point.
Yes, exactly. And replace the whole visual editor with some kind of visual publisher and actually I saw XWP had a plugin, and I tweeted it out this morning. I was looking at it, and it's in the customizer, so I agree that's probably not the place I'd want to go to be working on content, but I like the idea that I could have two panels, and as I'm typing in the visual editor, or their version of that visual editor, it's real time showing me what my site is going to look like. When I left align an image or right align an image, it automatically shows me just right on the screen what it's doing. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, this could be really enhanced further, where you could have two panels open and you could be typing away and working in the text editor or the visual editor, and then have it show in just real time what it looks like with your styles loaded. Because that's the biggest problem clients have, is they have two poor choices for writing content. One is the text editor, and if they don't understand how to write HTML, that's out. So you can't hang out in there. So then they go to the visual editor. The visual editor tricks you into thinking you've made mistakes. When you're aligning images left and right and you're writing paragraphs, it visually doesn't look the way it's going to when it renders out in finally later. And so they constantly think, oh, what did I do wrong? Why is this not working? And my floats weren't cleared, and all these other things that are being handled later by the style sheet are not showing up there. And it's very confusing for those people to write. And then they end up just doing very basic content, and it's limiting on what you can create. You can't be creative in the visual editor unless you know HTML.
And that also relies on proper themes and
right, exactly.
plugin development. If you have a proper theme, then what you see in the visual editor should be fairly close. But
you can't use classes in there, so you can't target things, and you have to go to the text editor to do that.
But that also brings us to that whole WYSIWYG idea, right? To get through WYSIWYG, you actually have to be in the application itself, which is why there is a project for inline editing on the front end. And I think that if inline editing is going to happen, it needs to happen in context, so not in the customizer, but actually inside the page itself. And the front-end editor project keeps stagnating for the same reason that everything else does. It's very, very complex. There are very few people that know how to do it, and it's not that sexy. So.
Cool.
Because most of us who are using WordPress are perfectly fine writing HTML.
Well, most of the people who might be contributing to the development of that, I think that's different from most of the people using WordPress.
Yes. I don't use the visual editor. I use the text editor when I write my posts. I mean, that's how I work. So I'm perfectly happy to just work in that world. It's not a problem for me. It's a problem for my clients, though.
And you and me and everyone else are the WordPress 1%.
True. And I do think that most of us are comfortable using the text editor, or maybe even the customizer, even if we don't necessarily like it. But I think for clients it's very confusing to this idea of, they have to be taught to add menus in the customizer. And I think that the vast majority of clients are going to use the visual editor and not the text editor. And I love the idea that there's some sort of preview screen for seeing what it's going to look like, similar to like when you're changing your theme in the customizer. That would be awesome. But
right. I mean, as it stands, you have to write a separate editor CSS file if you want the visual editor to reflect your most basic theme styles.
Yep. So I think we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back with our main topic. How do you write a great WordPress proposal that's going to win business? All right. So we're going to tackle that after the break. All right, and we're back. In the main topic, we're talking how do you write a great winning WordPress proposal? And I want to start with, I'm going to ask Morten, and then Jackie, and then Sallie. What's your process for writing a proposal? What do you do before you even begin writing the proposal? And what I mean by that is, how do you handle the discovery process? Is that part of the proposal? Is that before the proposal? How do you onboard the client before how do you get that information to write an effective proposal? Morten.
I talk to the client. I do a lot of work, assuming that assuming there is a conversation going with the client, as in they've contacted me or somehow I've gotten involved in the conversation. I have in-depth conversations with the client to understand what's going on. I usually also do a fairly extensive discovery process on whatever it is they're doing. Usually I try to do that before I have the first proper meeting. So what I'd like is to be able to come into the meeting and have an understanding of the business. So I've done things like educate myself on Zodiac boats, because we were doing a website on Zodiac boats once. So I know way too much about how Zodiac boats are made. Watch like how it's made about Zodiac boats and stuff like that. But it's knowing what the client is doing and knowing the language they use in their business has a huge impact, because then you can speak their language in the proposal and their goals and ideals and competition and all that stuff. In addition, I try to have conversations with other people in the company. I usually talk, if there's a secretary, I always talk to the secretary, because they usually know everything that happens in the interface between the end user and the company. And I just try to get a full understanding of what they're doing, because I can't provide them with a good product unless I understand their business.
Jackie, how do you handle that discovery and onboarding a client?
I know we're all going to agree on this. We're just going to go right across the board. Everybody's going to go, yeah, I agree. The more I ask questions about their business and the less I talk about what I do, the better, especially on those initial conversations. I think understanding why the client wants to do something right now, what's the purpose of it. If they many times you'll get, I need to get a website right now, and if you really dig in, you can start asking questions about why and understanding what the motivation is and what the reasons are for it. Maybe they're planning to sell their company in 6 months, and if you take the time to really have all of those in-depth conversations and start asking open-ended questions so that you can get detailed answers from them, I think that will make it easier to put together a proposal that actually answers, their needs. And basically, when they read this, it's going to go, this is exactly what we're looking for, and versus going with an approach where you say, hi, this is what I do all of this, or you're constantly bringing up other projects you did. And I think from a client's perspective, they don't really care about that. You're here to talk to them about their business and what they're doing. And so I try to remember, not to keep tooting my own horn or things like that when I'm working with them, and really stay focused on the client and what their objective is, why they want to do this. What's all of the reasonings behind it? Who are all the players? Who's the stakeholders in this? What's their budget? just all of those questions there. And I love when I get to do work with clients where I really understand their industry too. So that's like great. I've done several garden centers and things like that. Everybody knows I've got a horticulture background, and so I love growing plants. So anything involved in that area, I love that. I'm also, knowledgeable very well in real estate and a couple of other areas, but if it isn't an area that I know much about, I'm perfectly willing to go and do the research up front to find out more about it, so that you can actually be a partner with a client instead of just, so that you could actually work on this together. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I love the idea of Socratic questioning, speaking their language and digging in. Sallie, how do you approach discovery? How do you approach the pre-proposal?
Okay, so, let's say a client calls me or emails me and says, they need a website, and, so-and-so sent them in my direction. And, I'll talk to them a little bit about what's going on with them, what their major pain points are, that kind of thing. But then I will try to set up a paid discovery session so we can really go into some depth about, what are their goals for their business? What are the top 2 or 3 things they're trying to do in the next year to support their business? How will they know when they've succeeded? And how is their website able to support that? Because if I don't get that kind of information, I'm not in a good position to write a proposal. And also, if in the course of this I discover that they have a budget of $500, there's going to be a real limit on what kind of proposal I might write and how much time I might spend on writing it, and whether whether it turns out they really ought to go somewhere else. It's like, yeah, I need a 5-page brochure site, and I'm not going to update it until next year. Maybe you don't want WordPress.
You don't.
Or maybe you want WordPress.com, so at least the maintenance is being, done in the background behind you. But often, sort of what clients think they want and what's actually going to support their business goals are very different things, and so you really need to take some time to get into that. And then, with that information, at that point, they can, they'll get a sort of short list of general recommendations, and they can either ask me for a proposal and continue to work with me, or they can choose to go somewhere else and do something else, but my time is covered.
Yeah, and I love the idea of paid discovery. I'll just share really quick. This year I started making paid discovery like a prerequisite to even sending people a proposal and doing a project. And I've had a lot of success with this. It weeds a lot of the people who are just trying to, pick your brain for free. I always ask budget right up front, so I know what to recommend them, to know if I'm going to be a good fit, or if I know that I need to refer them elsewhere. The paid discovery is awesome because it gives you a chance to really dig in, ask the questions like why are they reaching out and doing this project now as opposed to later or before, and you can find out a lot of things here that you can't just in an initial phone call or email. And I usually record these as well so that I can use the language that they're using and use the phrases that they're using and repeat that later in the proposal. So that brings me to the next question. I want to ask Morten, what sort of things do you try and emphasize in your proposal? Are you emphasizing the value that they're getting? Do you emphasize the total cost? Are you emphasizing the features? What are the most important things to emphasize in the proposal?
You're muted,
Morten.
Yes, I am the master of technology. My proposals are, I take from experience that my proposals are not normal. Because usually when I provide proposals to clients, they're like, whoa, this is not what I expected at all. After we do a thorough discovery process and talk to the client and try to understand them, we also do a secondary discovery process where we talk to their target audience, usually without telling them, so that we get an understanding of where their goals are. This is all part of standard content strategy. Just establish a good content strategy. But then when we write the proposal, we create this large scope document, which basically breaks down from the top exactly what we are going to do. So we say, look, these are your goals. This is what we talked about. These are your client goals. And this is how we are going to meet those goals. We are going to use this application. We are going to write in these types of content types. We're going to handle the content in this following way. We're going to add these types of third-party features. This is how it's all going to stitch together. These are the things that will happen, like accessibility, responsive design, da, 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 da. These are the things that may happen if you want to add extra money, like crap that no one wants. And this is how it's all going to fit together. This is how long it's going to take, and this is what it's going to cost. And then we cost it out based on if you take the scope as is, it'll take this long and cost this much, provided we get all the content from you on time, and then we provide a schedule for that. In addition, if you want to add on things, it will cost this much extra. It'll take this much extra time. And then we have a huge section on the bottom that says, anything that falls outside of the scope of this particular document becomes extra cost, and the extra cost is tallied as follows, and then we have the schedule for that. And then all that becomes part of the contract. So it's not a separate document, it actually becomes part of the contract. So it ends up being like a 40-page document.
Whoa. So
I like that.
Jackie.
I like that idea. I do. I think that's great, is combining the proposal and the contract into one document. I like to, in addition to what Morten was saying there, which are great points and covering the benefits to them as you're going through, while I'm doing my discovery, I also find out kind of what their minimum viable product is, what's their minimum requirement, and then you'll get a sense of what their nice-to-haves are, and maybe some additional things, and then you could give them some pricing points based on those, like 3 tiers of things, so that and you can anchor it so that you're going to target the middle one if that's where you want to try to end up. But that, to me, will more focused on the features that they're going to get and what they're going to do, and maybe less talking about the technology part of it in there. I think sometimes I've made that mistake in the past where I kind of think everybody's as enamored with all the technology like I am, and they really don't care about those parts. They're more interested in the features that they're going to get, the functionality, and how that's going to help them achieve their goal. That's really the focus. And if you can outline that through your proposal, I think then when they get to the end of this, it answers their need.
No, most definitely. I think you're totally speaking truth to power there. You're emphasizing, what their goals are, and emphasizing that. Sallie, what are the things that you emphasize in your proposals?
Right. So it starts with kind of the executive summary overall thing, where we kind of talk about, here are the client's business website needs. Here's what their competitors might have that they don't. Then here's what we're going to do to address their immediate needs, and perhaps add in some things that their competitors don't have, and then we get into the detailed scope and the very clear statement: anything outside the scope of this project will be billed hourly at, and then the agreement, and some kind of, like, here are some things that you should understand. It's like, yes, you get the responsive design, you get the you get the this, you get the that. Here are the things that we need for the project. Here are some additional things that we can add if you want them. The proposed time frame is only valid if you cough up everything that you need to provide in a timely way.
Yeah.
That's a big challenge too for clients, though, is providing that information. It is, and John and I are going to have a podcast out on Wednesday. We're going to talk more about that. But the getting this content first is really helpful, and it also is very important for your discovery process. If a client has an existing website, it's a great time to go through that content with them and get a better understanding of why they created it initially. Is it something that they still need? What are all the digital assets that they have there? They might be wanting completely new branding, and that is a great way to learn more about what that journey is going to be like for them. And getting as much of that front-loaded early on is way better when everybody's kind of all in just, web love, and we're so excited, we're doing this, and it's going to be great, and that's wonderful. And then as you get towards the end of the project, it gets to be, oh gosh, okay, now you've sent me another email, you need what now? What didn't I provide? And it's not as fun at the end.
Yeah,
so
this is what we're talking about here is content strategy.
Yes, and which is absolutely critical, and I definitely recommend conducting a content audit on anything that you actually have, and going through it and saying, is this current? Is it relevant? Is it going to, help convert people if that's our goal? Where is there stuff missing that needs to be created before we can go live? Where is there stuff that we should just, get rid of at this point? And you discover all kinds of things. I mean, this big project I'm working on, it turns out that a ton of stuff that didn't belong in the blog had been dumped in the blog. So it's like, oh, so I've discovered all kinds of post types here. We have press releases, we have news coverage, we have presentation slides, we have, webinar videos, I would not have known about that without actually going through and touching all of these pages. Yeah. And there were a bunch of other things I wouldn't have discovered. Plus, going through it all gives you a much better sense of who your client is and what they do.
Yeah. I think clients, especially like retail organizations, they tend to use the blog in an ineffective way. They'll use it to post sales and things that are going on in their organization that are very dated and kind of event-based, and especially for sales and clearance sales and all these things. When I'm going through a site that I'm getting ready to convert, I'll find a lot of content in there that is outdated, not necessary, distracting, is not adding any value. And I tell the clients, let's create a what's new page every week that's a static page that you update your content there, versus having all this straggled content in your blog that you don't ever go back and delete. That's really kind of irrelevant, and it isn't helping your business anymore, especially if you're selling something that was on clearance 2 months ago and now you're selling it at a completely different price, and you haven't gone through your blog and removed that content. So it's, I think,
right. How do you set up your calls to action for after or within your post so that you can just update them centrally, and whatever is in there is going to be a current offer.
Exactly.
So here's kind of a cool question too. Doing a content audit, getting all your content ahead of time is definitely key. But here's a question about structuring the proposal. Do you emphasize value-based pricing, cost-plus based pricing? What type of pricing do you use in your proposals? We'll start with Morten.
Man, that is such a hard question. I work with a lot of students, and everyone wants to go into business, and they all ask this: how do you price out your content? It's well, I think it was which one of you said that? I think maybe it was Jackie that mentioned understanding what the budget of the client is before you get started. Assuming that the client has a reasonable budget, which usually is not the case. Then what you have to do is figure out how you work within that budget, and then make a scope based on that, right? And depending on the project, we either say it's going to cost this much. Just this is actually what it breaks down to. This is how much time we're going to spend. This is what happens. These are all the licenses that need to be brought. This is what the cost is going to be. Other times we say there is a MVP, so we can get you up and running at this rate, and then below that you can add all these extra features, and it'll either cost time or it'll be bundled into a specific cost. What I've experienced is that is a great way for a company to sign on to a project to say this will be the total cost unless something untoward happens, and explain exactly what would increase the cost, and then give them a payment schedule. So you pay at certain stages through the project. You will pay regardless of what happens. One of our steps is there's a 75% point, which is we're pretty much 75% done. I don't care where the content is. You're paying me, whether or not you have produced any of your content. So even if you're not...
That's right. After X period of time, you make the second payment, irrespective of where we are. So if you've hung us up, that's your problem.
Yeah, because at that point, we feel that we are at a point where we can't go any further without content, and you need to pay up, because that puts extra pressure on them. But the other thing we've done is when we start the project, we go in and say, before this becomes a huge cost issue, we can come in and do a consultation. It'll cost you this much money, and we usually say, a couple of hours just first to have a discussion, and it has a fixed cost just to get them started, and then we, at a certain point, discuss a better plan. But the reason why we did that is because I work with a lot of third-party developers and designers, and the only way that I can reasonably pay them is if I can tell them, I want you to do this, you have 10 hours, and then I will pay you for 10 hours. And then I know what their rate is, I can then pay them properly, and I can budget external work and budget my own work based on what I'm going to get as income.
Okay, we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to ask Jackie and Sallie the same thing. So we're going to take a break really quick. We'll be right back with that. Okay, we're back from our break. We were talking writing a great WordPress proposal, and we were discussing how do you do pricing? Do you do value pricing, cost plus pricing, hourly, and Morten was saying at the end of, there's a certain point where you have to charge people and say, irregardless of content, you need to pay us because we can't go forward without it. And I want to ask Jackie really quick, have you ever run into a situation like that where waiting on content is preventing you from getting paid, and how do you structure your payments in your proposals in present day?
Okay, yes, I have run into that problem, and it does cause scheduling issues as well. So it's not just about money, it's about time management, where I'm planning on blocking out next week to do this rollout of your website based on your content that you should provide, and we run into last-minute delays where I don't get that. Well, then if I've scheduled something else for the week after, it's not that easy for me to just keep moving everybody else back. I've got other clients that I've committed to starting work on. So that becomes a challenge there. So definitely trying to get your content first, or at least structuring your content where I get almost all of my money for the project once the final design is finished. So I typically get 50% up front, and then there's another 25 or 30% that comes once the design is finalized and done. And then we're maybe talking about 10 to 20% remaining at the end. That would be based on a lot of things that a client would provide. But I'm really thinking about kind of reversing that whole way of doing it and kind of front-loading the content in on the first end of it, and then that's a great opportunity to help a client with additional services that they might need. If they're not comfortable writing their own content, then I can either do it for them, or I can get a subject matter expert to work with them and refer them to get that done. And then I can kind of not have to book that project time right now. I can say, go ahead and get all your basic content created, and then come back and we'll schedule starting of the development process. So I think I'd really like to try that approach and see how that works in the future, versus trying to it just always seems like it's a difficult problem at the end getting the content. And like John and I have talked about this. It's like you're filling dummy content in on a website, and it's just all extra work and time. Then you get content from them that no longer fits the design because of the length of it or other changes and things, and it becomes, then you're going back and retweaking again and making additional changes. And I think it just adds to the cost of doing the website and really reduces your efficiency. So I would say I would love to have just a blank 2016 theme or a Genesis sample theme or whatever I'm working in. Get the content in there, get the images that they want to use, because from there I can design a really good color palette. I can figure out how I want to lay out the content now that I can visually see what it is. And it's a great way for your clients to see what it is they're actually saying, because they get enamored with the beauty of things, and they actually, what's really important is the message. I mean, that's your whole part of your branding and your marketing strategy is going to be, what is it that you're saying, not so much how you're showing those words. So, I mean, it does help for it to be visually nice and everything, but I just think a lot of times the content's done at the last minute and that the least amount of effort and emphasis is put on it. And that is the most important part from a SEO perspective and from a branding perspective in your marketing. And it seems like that would be the time that you would want to spend front-loading that stuff in the beginning when everybody's really interested in it all, and then let the other parts fall in later.
No, absolutely. Content is the thing that kind of holds up the final payment, like a lot of the time, or holds up the project launch, and that's why addressing that early is good. Sallie, so when structuring your proposals, do you do value-based pricing? Do you do cost plus? Do you do hourly? And here's the question: what are your clients able to understand? What is easiest for them to wrap their heads around?
I usually end up with a project price based essentially on how long I think it's going to take for me to do. So I will block it out as saying, okay, the scope includes, building this, and it's going to be X to build that, and building, this other thing, and it will be Y to build that, and and then your total is Z. And you will pay 25 up front, 50% after 30 days, even if you haven't done anything and nothing has happened yet, and the rest at the conclusion. And I've also started adding in a clause for, if you delay this project past the time that I have scheduled to be working on it, not only do you go to the end of the line in terms of when I'm going to find time to do it, but you are going to have to pay me a restart fee, because my brain will no longer be in your project, and I will have to go back over the whole proposal and all the conversations and any code I might have written and re-ground myself in it. Plus, I'm probably going to have to be doing maintenance on the dev site this whole time that's dragging out. But I have had some projects where I got paid hourly and made a pile of money. The only problem was that we didn't have a sort of payment schedule worked out very well, so I didn't start with money. But there are some things that do end up taking a lot longer than you think, and in those cases you're going to be better off being paid hourly. But most clients do not want an open-ended amount of money that they're about to spend. So they like to have here is a not-to-exceed cost for, this. And if you want anything else, it will cost you extra, and we should do it later so that we can get this part done on time.
Awesome. I in my experience, I'm really pushing value pricing right now, but what I have experienced is some people are fine with it, because if you lay out in the beginning, hey, if you do this project, here's the benefit that you're going to reap from it. You're gonna, earn $100,000 or whatever. Let's just say, and so this project, we'll just say it's 10,000 or whatever. That makes a lot of sense to them, but I think the biggest factor, it depends on how people have been used to hiring people in the past. If they're used to hiring people at an hourly rate and kind of lowballing people, then they have those people seem to have a harder time wrapping their head around like value-based pricing.
Those people may not know the value of what they're doing.
Yeah.
They might not be clear enough on, okay, we earned X this, we made X this year. We want to make Y next year, and this is the revenue our website brought in before, and if you are confident that based on what you've seen of their current site and what that their work can do, you can say, right, well, we can double the money that your website brings in next year. Then you've got a really good value argument. In some cases, if it's not a it's not a direct e-commerce site, or if it's not a you can say, well, bring X number of leads, but they haven't got a value on a lead. It's much harder to deal with.
I'll just say that the people that, when you lay out the value and it's a proven thing, and these are usually businesses that have some degree of success, and it's like, well, just imagine, if we clean up this stuff, you could be this much more successful. And the people who just kind of reject that and are still just kind of like, well, we just want to, kind of not spend a lot of money. I have no problem just saying, like, that's cool. You find somebody else. I'm good with that. So final question. We'll start with Morten. What things have you done or have you learned, along the way, things that have not worked in your proposals versus things that have worked, like overall? What are the things that you've done in the past that have just kind of not worked at all?
Over focus on technical aspects tends to not work at all. Also, because people generally do not understand what a good web design and development agency does, they tend to have a completely unrealistic view of the cost and work involved. And if you come at them with, like, when people ask me how much this is going to cost, that is usually the initial warning sign that there's something wrong with this entire conversation, and we need to have a much deeper conversation about what it is you want to do. So I used to say, it'll range between whatever and whatever, and that would usually end the conversation because they'd just be like, wow, that is super expensive, right? So instead, when people ask me what's it going to cost, I ask two questions. I ask, what is your current budget is? And if it's absurd, then I say, well, are you willing to invest a couple $100s in me coming in to consult with you and figure out what it is you need? So I end up doing that a lot, where I go in and work with a company for just a couple hours to figure out what they need, and then help them figure out how to go out and find someone else to do the job for them. But at least so that they have a better understanding of the industry. Another thing that does not work is not providing a proper schedule for content creation. So we talked a bit about content inventories. What I've started doing now, which is still in a test stage because I don't really have a lot of clients. I do most of my work training, not as much building anymore. But what I've started trying out is creating an inventory that's shared with the client, where in the inventory we assign people to every single piece of content, and we give them deadlines. And then we use Redbooth, which is a project management tool, sort of like, what is it called? That thing that everyone uses.
Basecamp?
Basecamp, only way better. And we've linked Redbooth to a Google document. So we can assign tasks to people within Redbooth. If they don't perform the tasks within a certain deadline, they get a warning saying, hey, you need to perform this because you're holding the project back. So there's a conversation going on as they're working. And the boss or whoever's managing this thing can go in and look at this spreadsheet and see, like, how come everything under John's column is red? Right? You're not doing your work, and
John,
then either fire John or assign it to someone else, right? And having all that in a spreadsheet makes it extremely visual. So we color code every piece of content to say whether or not it has been done, whether or not it's delayed, whether, like, what's happening for all these pieces, and we kind of leave that to the client, because that way Instead of saying, you need to make all the content for the entire website, you say, here's all the content that at some point needs to be created. This is when we need it by, and this is how you need to manage this internally in your company. And that seems to work better than just handing it to the client without really giving them any guidance. But like I said, this is a relatively new process, so it hasn't been fully scale tested yet. But I think that's probably a better path than just saying, I need 500 posts. I need you to rewrite all this content. By the way, there are 6 new post types. Go. It doesn't work.
No, I love that you're making it measurable and you're assigning roles and saying here's what we expect and here's the time frame and here's who's assigned to what. Jackie, what are things that you've done with your proposals that have not worked in the past?
I think the biggest one for me is the things I've left out of the proposal or left out of the contract, right? So that, because your proposal turns into a contract at some point and you're going along the project now. So the things that come into play, which is everybody's already discussed, is, you know, clients not working within the deadlines that you've set. That's a big challenge. And it seems like we have a little bit more of a difficult time holding them as accountable as they have holding us accountable because they've hired us. So the relationship is already set up where, you know, it's difficult to go to your client and, you know, say, well, I had asked you to have this to me on Monday, but it's now Friday, I still don't have it. Oh, I'm sorry, you know, and it's more of that client you know, vendor relationship type of a dance that you do there, and I think that's a challenge. So having a better schedule that has consequences, okay, because there's no point in having a schedule if there are no consequences, because clients are busy. This is not their main focus. This is my main focus to build out their site, but it's not their main focus. So they're busy. They've got other things going on in their business. So if there aren't any consequences, there will be delays. There's going to be delays anyway, but there will be delays, severe delays, if there are no consequences for things. So I think structuring that in a friendly way that's not, you know, you're not creating an adversarial relationship. And I think that's the big challenge we all have is at what point does this become adversarial now with my client when they are not providing me what I need in order to finish the project on schedule, or the scope creep issues and not adequately addressing those things where clients don't understand, I just need a couple of more things done over here, or a few more things, or we need to add 2 more menu items, and these things, those things that were not kind of in the original scope. And so being really clear about what that scope means, and early on saying and finding a way to communicate that and say, hey, that's great, I'd love to add that. Do you want me to send you? Do you want me to estimate what that's going to, how that's going to impact the cost of the project, or do you want me to do a change order for you to do this work? And then basically right up front they already know there's going to be an additional cost for it, and definitely not wait until you get further down the road with this and you've already started to do the work and then you mention, oh well, you know, this was extra, and by then you have a problem. So I think adequately putting all of that stuff in the contract up front and doing it in a win-win situation with your client is a really good approach to it. And I try to always approach everything like, how would I take this if I was the client? And, you know, look at things from their perspective. Every time something goes wrong in a project, it is my fault. It is either the fact that I have not communicated properly what the expectations were, or that I didn't scope it properly, or I didn't do it the right discovery, or I didn't see the red flags. It's usually, almost every time, it's my fault. I could have, and I always ask myself, well, what could I have done to manage this better? And then how can I take what I just learned and then roll that into my next contract? How can I make it easier for the client to be successful?
Mm-hmm. Always learn.
Yep, definitely set expectations. Sallie, what things have you done that, what things have you done in the past with your proposals that didn't work?
Right. Well, sort of all of the above that Jackie mentioned, but probably the worst thing, that has ended up causing me the most frustration, is doing a pro bono project without creating a detailed scope of work and assigning a monetary value to it, because these are the people who will be the most trouble as clients, the ones who are not paying at all, who are not paying you at all because they don't know how much of your time they're taking and how much value you're giving them unless you tell them.
No, totally agree.
That's a great idea, Sallie. I love that idea.
I've done that too. Where if you're gonna do full price or free, and I do agree with that philosophy, full price or free. Show them how much you're discounting. Put the full price and the discount the full price, so they know. I think this has been a stellar episode. We've learned a lot about, how to construct a winning WordPress proposal. Panel, tell us how you can get a hold of yourselves. Morten, how do people get a hold of you?
Twitter, I'm at Morten, because that's my name. You can also hunt me down on lynda.com from LinkedIn. If you go to lynda.com/MOR10, you get all my fantastic courses. And I happen to have a new course on content strategy that just came out a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, well, I've watched every one of your
very
episodes,
related
Morten.
to what we're talking about.
I've watched every episode, Morten, that you've done. I will watch that one. If it just came out, that's my next one.
Awesome.
Awesome. Jackie, how do people get a hold of you?
You can reach me on Twitter at jdelia, JackieDelia.com, and on my new podcast, Rethink.fm.
Great. Sallie, how do people get a hold of you?
If you can spell my name, you can find me. But I am unique on Google, so my parents didn't realize they had search engine optimized my name. But WPFangirl.com will point you to where you need to go.
Great. And Jonathan, how do people get a hold of you? Oh, Jonathan can't. Jonathan can't hear
us.
Okay. Anyway, Jonathan, people can get a hold of my co-host, Jonathan Denwood. His email is jonathan at WP-Tonic or WP-Tonic.com. And you can find him at his startup is mail-right.com. Or you can find him on Twitter at jonathandenwood.com. And you can get a hold of me. My name's John Locke. You can get a hold of me at lockdowndesign.com. And my Twitter is lockdown_. There you go. So Jonathan's saying raise your hand at the end because he can't hear. He's in the chat. We're having